Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to Hollywood Breaks. It's good to be with you again this week. And as always, our leading professional in the entertainment industry and overall knowledge base, Keith Rauch, is with us. Keith, welcome to Hollywood Breaks once again.
Thank you, Tim. Great to be here as always.
Don't you love? I'm going to start making up these titles for you. We're not going to.
Yeah, keep it up. Keep it up. My ego needs a little stroking every now and then, you know?
I'm gonna warn people now that we're recording this a little bit later than we usually do. So when Keith is drinking out of a whiskey glass, you know that it's not morning up.
I'm only taking the advice of our previous guest, Cameron Delavu, who was like, you know what, you guys should do like a cocktail hour, and so I'm doing a cocktail hour.
Morning up, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm drinking out of my RevThink mug, so we're I'm still looking like I'm doing coffee hour, but you're
yeah. Well, I have a Motion bowler. I don't know if you guys can see this. Probably not. It says Motion on it, which is a vendor that I used quite a bit when I was at Fox. So here's to you, Motion. Keep up the good work.
That's it. And send us more swag so we can drink more drinks.
Yeah, more swag, more swag.
Okay, a lot to get to this week. Disney Investor Day was really big. I took some notes. I'm sure you took some notes. We got a lot. And I know you read all the trades afterwards. So we got some of that insider stuff. And then later on, I want to talk to you more about what's happening with all these studios, because I feel like the players are being played out. Clearly, the stuff that came out from Warner this week was pretty big. But Universal seems to be holding on the end, and we can ask some big tech questions later on of who's going to win this game. But before, of course, we get started, over your right shoulder there, Keith, is the Predators movie poster.
Right there.
Tell us, who's the artist on this one?
So this is actually, this is from Predators. This was a movie that I think was, released about, I can't remember the exact year. This was the Robert Rodriguez version. And this is actually a design from his Troublemaker Studios that he repurposed as a one sheet, a teaser one sheet.
And they're out of Austin, right?
Yeah, they're right out of Austin, which is a big booming entertainment town. Yeah, this was the exclusive version for this limited edition. I did a screening at South by Southwest. Obviously, it makes sense because it's in Austin. And this was one of the design that we used for that particular event. So I
think it's pretty cool, even appropriate to have him doing that poster at a South by Southwest. It's like Austin all the time kind of thing going on. So very cool.
Yep.
As always, keeping the artists in the front of the mind, and the people behind the scenes are doing the work. It's always good. Marketing is a hard job, and the support wouldn't. The work wouldn't happen without the support of the people. So we're going to keep on promoting people. And if you really want your movie poster seen behind Keith, you're going to have to wait in line. He has a lot. I
have a lot. But, if you want to send me one, please do. I'm happy to feature it.
You can direct message Keith right now and send him your movie poster. We'll put it out there.
I'll even take a fan poster, or a fan-made poster. And those are always cool to display, too.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
Disney totally rocked the house this week. Investor Day. Can you believe this number? 86.8 million subscribers. And It's not even a year older yet, right?
It's a little over a year, 13 months. And that was their original target for, I think 80 to 90 million was their target for 2024. And they're already there in 13 months. I mean, it's quite an achievement, I have to say. It really is. And the event itself was very much, it did not feel like a typical investor. I mean, I don't watch a lot of these, but it just didn't feel like a typical investor presentation. It was very content heavy. It felt a lot like a CinemaCon to me, which is where the studios present all their stuff to the exhibitors, their upcoming product. And that's what it felt like to me. It just felt like a giant sort of like, this is everything that we've got coming out in the next year, 2 years. This is stuff that's in development. They brought out every sort of production head to present. I will say the length, it was a little long. 4 hours is quite hefty. And for anyone to sit for that amount of time is quite intense. They may want to contemplate maybe splitting it up or trim it down, but I know they had a lot to present.
It felt to me like an Apple presentation. Like sometimes
it did a little bit,
go pretty long. And I think the presentation quality, that kind of stuff, I think that they were, I wouldn't say copycatting Apple, but they're obviously trying to play the same game that Apple is trying to play, and trying to get investors recognition. And clearly Wall Street loved it. Wall Street boomed.
I mean, their stock's the highest I think it's ever been, almost. lost billions of dollars in the last year, and their stock just keeps going up because they're just, I think they are, the investors are wholly on board for what Disney's strategy moving forward.
Yeah, and we even got some of the insight into some of that strategy. We know that they're looking for, I mean, they had to blow away their old ideas of what 2024 would look like. Now they're looking for 300 to 350 million people on all of their platforms, which is good. That includes Hulu, obviously broadcast, Disney Plus,
ESPN Plus,
ESPN Plus, yeah. So they're grouping it all together, but that's really only just 3 times what Disney Plus is now, or near around 3 plans. So trying to get the other couple platforms to meet the same numbers, and obviously for Disney Plus. And they're willing to step up and even invest just a couple $1 billion, not too many, $8 to $9 billion.
Just a little bit of money, just a little bit of money in the content.
I feel like I mean, the U.S. economy out of the debt with what Disney's paying for. If we just all stop demanding TV shows, we can recover our economy with this.
It's amazing the amount of money they are planning to put forward in the next 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's like 10 Star Wars shows or Marvel shows or something like that over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. They're trying to have something new on the platform like every month, I think was what they said. And might even be more than that. They are wholly 100% in for the D2C, the direct-to-consumer branch. And that's 100% what they're focusing on. It was very interesting how little they talked about theatrical.
Yeah.
Understandably so, given the market right now. But even when Kevin Feige came out to present, his Marvel stuff, which also a lot of it looked great, and me being a Marvel geek and comic book geek growing up, a lot of it was really quite, I'm really excited about a lot of it. He really only subtly mentioned that Black Widow will be in theaters in May. And I think that's overly optimistic personally. As most people know, the vaccine was approved yesterday, so they're going to start rolling it out. But the way the schedule's rolling out, it doesn't look like it will be available to the general public until April or May.
Yeah.
And that's assuming there's no supply chain issues or anything like that. So I think it's optimistic to think that people are going to ready to go back to theaters in May, but clearly it signals that they still look at theatrical as an option, but to them, the future is streaming. That's where they feel like their investment is best.
Or at least their present future.
Future.
I have some theories, and I'm going to ask you about this in a little bit, but I have some theories of what Disney might do as they get into exhibitor issues. They're going to do something different than what Universal is doing. And I think that, trying to take a playbook out of what Warner did and try and announce everything's just going to OTT, I think that created some mess for Warner Brothers. But let me pull a quote here. I believe that this, I was watching the segment on the FX platform, which I thought was pretty interesting. And what they mentioned is that with kind of cleaning up Hulu, really putting FX on Hulu as kind of the primary source for that, they doubled the viewership of FX viewers by 120%. So they have more viewership on Hulu than they do on broadcast right now. One, I just point out, like, that's a pretty amazing little shift right there, in that they could actually pull out of all traditional broadcast, and have just as many viewers or more viewers now on Hulu.
Yep.
And clearly, if they pulled out, and maybe this is part of the plan or part of the future revelation, that if they pull off a broadcast, even more people go to Hulu, and they own all of those owners. They don't have to pay they're not getting seconds from a cable company on subscribers. They're getting all the money up front.
Yep.
So a huge move there. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I believe it was John Landgraf who did the presentation for FX, who's been there for a long time, was there pre-merger with Disney, and has always sort of been the guy who seems to be a one step ahead of everybody else in terms of where the business is going, where he feels the industry is going. He was the first one to really talk about sort of the overflow of content and how there is a possibility of there just being too much out there. And he's also really responsible for building the FX brand. And the idea of FX being sort of the cabler that is just fearless, similar to HBO, where HBO sort of shapes these very prestige adult dramas. John Landgraf was very much responsible for sort of bringing this FX and giving it sort of its reputation that it currently has. And you're right. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are cord cutters. And the one that they universally all have is Hulu, because you can get a lot of other network stuff on Hulu that you can't necessarily get on a Netflix or what have you. So it definitely seems to me that FX made a smart move, or Disney made a smart move pushing FX on there, because FX did have its own SVOD before that called FX Plus, which was sort of like a way it's sort of you'd get episodes before they premiered on cable, but now they sort of shifted it over to Hulu, and clearly it brought a lot of the audience with them. So it seems to be a very effective strategy and may sort of light the path for them in the years ahead.
Yeah, to me, like it's a smart idea to just recognize, like, oh, we can actually create a platform and multiple brands can be living on that one platform. They did talk about the brand confusion that was taking place on traditional broadcast, because they were swapping things and placement of shows weren't always consistent. And now they can be consistent. Everyone can find it in one place. They're really focusing on that. What I like about a lot of this conversation is for the content makers out there, right? So we know that content making has been a struggle for the last year and a half, but really looking at the 14 billion to 16 billion Disney's going to put in the marketplace, we know the competitors have to meet their piece of it. And John also said this. He said, I'm going to try to get this right. It's something like today's new content is tomorrow's perpetual library. And this thought of like, that's clearly part of the strategy that Disney's going for, or at least currently recognizing, is that the group with the biggest library is going to have their greatest return in the future. That way the viewer's dollar has the deepest pockets.
And I think it's also a recognition overall that, because what's driving a lot of the subs for Disney right now is sort of that draw to the library, the old school titles. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago, my kids watched Frozen 2. They watched Alice in Wonderland last week. A lot of those classic titles are what really are driving a lot of subs. And they realize that that's great that it's there, but they're going to need to sustain it with something. And it can't just be The Mandalorian. And I think they're recognizing that they have to really ramp it up. I think the pandemic has sort of pushed a lot of people to the streamers before the natural progression of things. Obviously, Hamilton helped a lot. I think Hamilton brought a lot of new subscribers in the wheelhouse as well. And so I think that it's a recognition that we've got to ramp up the content. But I do want to make one point. Bob Iger said something which I thought was kind of a subtle dig at Netflix. It was sort of like, we're about quality, not quantity. So I think that was sort of his way of saying, listen, we're not just going to throw stuff up on the streamer like 5 new episodes a day, because as you have pointed out in the past, a lot of Netflix oftentimes suffers quality-wise. It looks like it's shot on the cheap, and it's something that's just thrown together because they just need stuff on the platform. Yeah. And I thought that was sort of like, we're not going to rush things out just to get things out. We know that you trust us as a brand. We're not going to just throw up stuff up there. Now, of course, are they going to have misses? Absolutely. Nobody's perfect. But
from Bob Iger's mouth to Disney's feet, they're going to heavily invest on these really great classic high-end shows from the past. Turner and Hooch, 3 Men and a Baby. I mean, I'm saying that sarcastically, obviously, because like these are not the Disney classics that played out over and over.
No, I mean,
the reinvestment in these old things are clearly just trying to reuse old scripts and trying to get new viewership.
Well, they're mining they're mining the 21st Century Fox purchase. They talked a lot about Night at the Museum. They're going to do an animated version of that. There's Ice Age 10.
Hi. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
But they're really going to look at those as well, and I understand it that this has obviously forced them to really kind of push to get as much produced as possible. Yeah. But again, they have to be aware that they're one of the few places that actually has a brand. And
I'll go back to the content maker. You have to recognize this is a huge opportunity. I mean, the current strategy is just spend, make. And they're going to need makers. They're going to need people with pitches, ideas, production companies. They have to spend this money somewhere. If that's the current race, and it's not going to last forever. This is a gold rush in a new area, and they're going to go crazy this way. If you're sitting on your hands for the next 5 years, you're crazy, or you're just not a content maker.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about how, you know, even though there's been a lot of disruption and a lot of, you know, change, rapid change in the industry over the course of the last 9 or 10 months, a lot of this is going to be good for a content creator because there's going to be so much more ability to have places to get your content made. And I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, with sort of this shift and with what more Warner Media moving their entire slate onto the streamer as well, day and date with the theaters, I think this also gives an opportunity for some original storytellers to potentially break through. The window strategy that sort of had been beholden to the industry for so long, which is now breaking down, was really a lot of the reason why you didn't see a lot of original content, because they couldn't necessarily afford to produce movies that didn't have a built-in audience. And now with the ability to sort of have the streamer as well as a theater option available, there is potential to maybe take a little bit more of a risk. Now, I don't know what the financials break out in terms of what you make on a streamer versus what you make in theatrical. And obviously you're going to make more money in theatrical when you release it, but it might not necessarily need to have a huge opening weekend to be a profit maker. And I think that is where there's an opportunity here for a more original storytelling. I mean, that was sort of the thing that kind of struck me about sort of the live action presentation of Disney, to your point. A lot of it was deep reaching into the sort of IP well and grabbing as much as they could that really already had a brand attached to it versus actually having to come up with an original story, which, you know, to me, I think is where the opportunity is. And I think, you know, just remaking a lot of things from the 80s and 90s is not a sustainable strategy. Or taking an animated property and making it live action. Well, clearly the public wants it because they're all making money. But at the end of the day, it's like, I think we also have to think a little longer term, and eventually that well is going to run dry. So it'll be good to sort of be able to sort of tap in sort of more original content. And I'm hopeful that because there's so much money flowing into these streamers and in terms of, you know, them just needing it, I think it's going to be a really great time, as you said,
Totally.
a lot of content.
And who knows, maybe Steve Guttenberg could get a reboot on his career.
Maybe
dragging out 3 Men and a Baby.
He might have a cameo. He and Tom and Ted Danson.
No, right on.
It's
going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit of a twist on three men living together.
Yeah.
In 2020, it's a little bit of a different flavor than 3 Men.
When it was released in late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different issue.
Yeah.
All right. So, Disney Investor Day is great. And, you know, thank God now we know what Kareem Daniels does. It was made so, again, being sarcastic. Clearly we don't know what that guy
I
does.
still don't really know what I understand what his role is, but the way it was presented, when his appointment was announced, it was like, well, it'll make more sense after Investor Day. I still don't really know. He was great. I thought he did a great job sort of, you know, projecting a very sort of calm manner despite all that sort of under his purview, supposedly.
Yeah.
But I still don't really understand. Like, it seems to me that he's the guy who just tells the content creators where their stuff's going to live based on all the information he has before him. But that doesn't seem to me to be that big of a deal.
You know what he's going to be? He's going to be the scapegoat because we just saw this thing play out, and things are getting pretty juicy the way Warner Brothers rolled out their thing and just saying, "Hey, we've decided where it's all going to go. It's going to go sit there on the on HBO Max." And holy cow, did it start a firestorm?
Yes.
So if Disney, they'll just blame him and fire him and move on, and that way,
yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, you know, I pointed this out last week, not to toot my own horn, but there was one person I really didn't want to be going into the weekend, and that was Toby Emmerich. And I think he really had a rough weekend. And, you know, given the articles that came out this week from Christopher Nolan, basically calling HBO Max the worst service, and, you know, Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune, you know, playing his own piece, Richard Lovett, you know, all the guys coming out and just blasting it. And, you know, I think it makes some sense from an economic standpoint of view, just because of the nature of the market right now. But the fact that they did a lot of it without really reaching out to their talent was was I think a bit
Well,
of a
it makes me wonder too. Like they gave Chris Nolan the chance early on. His movie didn't save the day. They had to make some kind of reaction to what's there. So
I will give them credit though, because they're not blinking. I got an email yesterday basically announcing that all these titles were going to be on HBO Max, and there was already a sizzle. So they are not pulling back. They're like, nope, this is what we're doing. This is how we're moving forward. And they did it. And I mean, and we'll see how it plays out. Like I said last week, it could turn out to be the most genius move of 2021, or it could end up being an absolute disaster. Who knows?
What an interesting thing that's taking place over there, because the need for Warner Brothers to come up with some sort of strategy, that's really all they own. They don't really have any other kind of push. They don't have any other leverage to place themselves in the field, and they have to do something out there.
Yeah.
And it kind of, if you ask me, it kind of shows Warner's cash position, that they're being more reactionary than, say, the deep pockets of Disney that have the kind of rich library and the pieces that are there. They're really just trying to keep up with the Joneses on this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's driven by the debt load that AT&T has, and they've seen how Wall Street reacts to Disney Plus and the streamers, and they know that this is a way to goose the numbers on HBO Max, because the narrative is starting to be written that the launch of HBO Max was a bit of a failure, and they need to really sort of prove that this is going to be a sustainable model for them. The stock itself didn't necessarily jump sky high when they announced this, so I don't think there's necessarily people are necessarily convinced this is going to be a success. It raised some eyebrows. But I think the other interesting point about this is Richard Rushfeldt, who writes a newsletter called The Ankler, and those of you who know who he is, if you don't know who he is, I suggest Googling and subscribe. It's a great newsletter. He's got a lot of inside info. He sent out an interesting piece today that basically said there are really two studios left that are invested in a theatrical experience, and that's Universal and Disney. Warner Media is out for 2021. We don't know what's going to happen now with Sony and Paramount. Arguably, they've been selling their 2020 slate to the streamers. But what are they going to do in 2021? And with Paramount Plus coming down the pike, that probably means that'll be where Paramount will feed. Or will they take advantage of the fact that there's going to be a bidding war for content in 2021 and just keep selling, because they're making a lot of money, and they may make more money selling it than they would have made in a theatrical release. So
just being the outsource company that's doing it
all.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting to see how this all shakes out. And Warner Media said this is a temporary thing, but I don't really know if you can put this genie back in the bottle. It's out. People are going to get used to seeing movies at home now. And as I said, as I've been saying for a long time, they've been not going to the movies for 9 months. They've adjusted to it. Now, I know there are surveys that say that once the theaters reopen, people are going to rush back to the movies. I think people will go back to the movies. Rush? I don't know.
It's not like it's going to be a gun you could shoot off and say, as of this day, no one's going to be afraid anymore, and they're just going to start running to the theaters. It's going to take a little while to work this thing out for sure.
I agree.
Yeah, and kind of what I've been hearing this whole episode a little bit is that the numbers that we're used to, the theatrical numbers that we're used to, the viewership numbers that we're used to, the type of content visibility and viewership that we're used to, it's all going to change. This idea of perpetual content spreads out the audience even more. It's really all long tail models that everyone's really playing out. So launch it soon and then just play it forever. But there's only so many viewing hours in a day, and the viewers cannot figure out if they can't figure out where to find the content, how to play it, and those issues that we keep talking about here, we'll say what to watch problem. But also, like, the numbers are not going to show up the same way they were. It's almost like, when cable came into the television world, there'll never be a television show meets the numbers of MASH, because it just doesn't have the concentration it used to have.
Yeah,
theatrical's taking the same kind of hit here, and the studios are going to have to start changing what is valuable to them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Wonder Woman 1984, which is the first one which will launch on Christmas Day. I mean, to get the number of subs that they would have made, what they would have made theatrically had they released it, it's a ridiculous number, and it's hard to believe that that's even a realistic goal. But I think it's really about driving as many subs as they can to just build up the service as best they can, and this is the one way they think they felt they could do that.
I think it's interesting going back to the idea that there's only 2 studios left. I mean, there has to be some strategy being played out there. And I think you've said it before. I'll back it up as if you did, because I think this is a smart idea, and that somebody's going to step in and buy another studio. These studios that don't have as deep pockets are going to be bought up by one of the big players, and a Google or an Apple showing up and buying a studio in place. It's going to happen, right? It's almost, I feel like somebody's going to come in and buy the studio, and the studios are going to start buying the exhibitors. The chess pieces are definitely playing out that way. Maybe Apple will step in and have a theatrical distribution, theatrical studio model for Apple TV Plus, because Apple TV Plus
I mean, Apple seems to be the best the prime buyer who's motivated the most, I think, right now, because their content's not that great. No. Their pipeline isn't exactly bursting. So you look at somebody like Sony, Sony corporate, who wants to get out of the movie biz, doesn't really want to keep playing in that sandbox.
Oh, I like that move where Apple buys Sony, like a tech company replacing another tech company in the content media game. Sony had VHS, Apple has iPhone.
I mean, it'll be interesting because Sony doesn't, or you could potentially see a partnership. Because Sony doesn't have a D2C service anymore, because they closed what they had on Xbox, potentially there could be a partnership where Apple TV Plus becomes the exclusive D2C distributor of Sony movies.
Sure.
And that could potentially be something that could work out, and that could be the first step on a way to
maybe Apple just buys all of Sony. All the technology, all their old IP.
I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about the studio. But if they're going to buy the whole company, that's a possibility too. You never know.
They're worth more than the United States.
Everything's upside down, right is left. Dogs and cats living together. It's insane.
Thank you, Bill Murray. That's perfect.
Yeah.
No, yeah, totally. I can kind of see that thing playing out. And by the way, let's just mark this time, because when it does come true, I want to be able to say, look, Keith called this moment in 2020, in December 2020, when we can totally see how these pieces are playing themselves out.
Yep.
We'll think we're so smart then. Well, that's really great. I think, there's so much stuff happening right now. And my encouragement again is like, this disruption is all opportunity. And early on, when we first started talking, I felt like we were trying to fit the pieces together to tell people, encourage people why these changes are really good if you're a content maker, to see the opportunity. And now the big players, the studios, are actually stepping up and giving us the words and the strategy that you can easily fit into. Mm-hmm. So it's a good day to be in the content making game. You just have to understand what they're looking for. Yep. And always reverse engineer their content. You have to know why you're making it, who wants to watch it, therefore where it's going to go. I feel like I'm doing Kareem Daniels' job for him. Why, where, and when, right?
Yep, exactly.
Understand that entire place. And then, of course, in the marketing and sales part, we're going to have to start looking at different numbers, recognizing the opportunities that are there, and know how to play the new game. It can't just be about the prettiest show on the planet. Yep. No one's going to watch trailers at the level we used to and consume them the way they used to. There's too much distribution happening that anyone can kind of concentrate or focus in some certain areas.
Yep.
Well, Keith, I'm going to leave you back to your cocktail. Well, by the way, what is it that you're drinking?
Dark and Stormy.
Oh, I love Dark and Stormy. You have to make me one of those with our new swag that people are going to send us after this. Hey, tell us who's joining us next week.
Oh, yes. Robin Geisen will be rejoining us next week. And we'll be doing a sort of recap of the year and what we all think is coming in 2021. So do not miss it.
And we love Robin. She's one of our first guests.
Yep.
And she comes from that talent background. So if you're watching this episode, you have questions you want to ask or ideas, you can definitely direct message us, send us something on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever, email. We'll read that and see if we can't throw those messages before Robin. She's on the inside, although she's not going to tell us the secrets, even though she knows. We'll try to get something out of her.
We'll see if we can get something out of her anyway.
Maybe we should make some Dark and Stormies for her. Maybe
there you go. Yep.
All right. Thank you all again for watching Hollywood Breaks. It's good to be with you this week. We can't do it without our behind the scenes people, Lydia, who is recording it this week and making sure it's being distributed, even though we're running late. So Lydia, thank you for the hard work you're doing. Thank you all for joining us this week. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this channel. There's more to come and more ideas we have going out there. And Keith, enjoy the Christmas shopping. Whatever little time's left, make sure you get out there and get that done.
I'll mask up and get it done. Trust me.
All right. Until next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep, see you next week.